My wife poisoned me slowly for 3 years while everyone called her the perfect partner. She told doctors I was paranoid, told colleagues I had a breakdown, told my brother he was lucky I still had her. But a camera and her own cooking exposed it all. I woke up with another headache. It started like they always did, a dull throb behind my eyes that spread across my skull, pushing at the edges of my brain. I rolled out of bed, cradling my head in my hands, and breathed through it. I had to. I had a meeting with the Marine Institute in a couple of hours, and I wasn't about to cancel. Not again. Mira had already gotten up, the faint smell of herbal tea wafting from the kitchen. I could hear her humming, probably as she chopped something for breakfast, maybe fruit, or those damn smoothies she'd started making every morning. She was good at this, the whole nurturing wife thing. She had her routine down. She'd gotten my migraine medication organized for me, always with a little reminder about staying hydrated, always with a soft smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. I shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing my temples. "Good morning," she said, not looking up from her work. "How's your head?" "Same as usual," I muttered, taking a seat at the table. "But I'll manage." Mira turned, a soft smile pulling at her lips. She was dressed for the day already, a loose floral blouse and khakis that made her look like she was always on a botanical field trip. It was her thing. Plants, nature, the world beyond the water I studied. "I made you a smoothie," she said. "It'll help with your energy today." I didn't want it. I didn't want anything from her. But I took the glass anyway, and she didn't miss a beat. She always did this, push me just enough so I didn't refuse. "Thanks," I said, my voice coming out rough. I should have been better about this, about her. She was so good to me, after all. But everything felt off. The way she hovered. The way she made it seem like I couldn't take care of myself. It gnawed at me, but I couldn't find a way to confront it without feeling like I was the one losing my mind. "So, what's on the agenda today?" she asked, grabbing her own mug and settling into the chair across from me. I hesitated, trying to focus through the haze in my brain. Field research for the Institute. They want some new data on coral behavior. Nothing too groundbreaking, just baseline updates. "But I'm fine, Mira." She gave a little nod, though the tightness around her mouth didn't escape me. "Good. Just don't overdo it, okay?" The thing was, I knew I had to keep going. I couldn't afford to slow down. Not now. Not when everything felt like it was slipping. But there were days when it all felt like too much. Days when the dizziness started creeping in, when I couldn't focus, when everything in the world seemed too sharp or too dull, when Myra's concerns seemed too intense, too controlling. And then there were the moments when I wondered if I was imagining it all. Maybe the stress of the past few months, getting married, the coastal restoration project, the long hours, was finally catching up to me. Everyone said I was under a lot of pressure. Maybe they were right. "Did you take your medication this morning?" Mira asked, watching me closely. I nodded, the motion too jerky, too quick. "Yeah, I did." She didn't seem convinced. "I'll make sure you take your midday dose, okay? Just to stay on top of things." "All right." I didn't argue. Not today. The headache was already making me too tired for a fight. I took a sip of the smoothie, the taste of pineapple and mint too sweet, but I didn't say anything. I'd learned a while ago that Mira didn't like to be questioned. It wasn't even that I thought she was malicious. It was just, well, something wasn't right. And I wasn't sure what it was yet, but I was going to find out. I finished my smoothie, the nausea creeping in the longer I kept it down. My stomach was already rebelling, but I'd learned to ignore that too. It wasn't as bad as the vertigo, the moments when I would forget something important or not recognize my own reflection. Mira was watching me as I stood up. "Are you okay?" she asked, a furrow in her brow. "Fine," I said, pushing past the tightness in my chest, the heaviness in my limbs. But the truth was, I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine for weeks. I walked out the door before she could say anything else. I needed to get out of the house. Get away from her. I needed space to think. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was normal. Not anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was too loud, too full of the same questions that had been circling for weeks. The nausea in my stomach was building again, and my head was a steady drumbeat of pain. Mira was already asleep next to me, the soft rise and fall of her breathing somehow irritating in the silence of the room. I kept staring at the clock, willing the time to move faster. I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't even trust my own body anymore. It felt like the world was warping around me, and the more I fought to hold on to it, the faster it seemed to slip through my fingers. I tried to get up quietly, but the floorboards creaked under my weight. Mira stirred beside me, then immediately relaxed again. I took a breath and moved to the kitchen, a quick jolt of panic in my chest. I didn't know what I was doing, but something was happening to me. I had to figure out what it was, or I was going to lose everything. When I walked into the kitchen, Mira was already there, a soft light glowing above the counter. She was at the sink, her back to me, rinsing a glass. I could feel the shift in the air, like the space between us was too thin, too fragile. I swallowed hard and opened the fridge, hoping to buy myself a moment to think. Eli. Her voice came quietly, but I could hear the edge of concern in it. What are you doing? I froze, my fingers hovering over the milk carton. I just wanted some water. She didn't say anything right away, but I could feel her eyes on me. I could feel her waiting for me to explain myself. I'll get it for you, she said after a moment, her tone soft but insistent. You've had a long day. You don't need to be up. I'm fine, I said too quickly, my words a little sharper than I meant. She didn't flinch. No, you're not. I turned to face her, and there it was, the tight smile, the glint in her eyes. It wasn't concern anymore. It was something else, something more controlling, something cold. I'm not fine, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I know you've been trying to hide it, but you're doing something to me, Mira. Her expression didn't change, but I saw the subtle shift, the way her shoulders tightened, the way her jaw clenched. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice smooth, too smooth. Eli, you've been under a lot of stress lately. You need rest. You need help. We've been through this before. No. I shook my head, stepping closer, my heart hammering in my chest. You're doing something. I don't know what it is, but it's you. You're poisoning me. Her eyes flicked to the counter where I knew she'd placed my dinner just hours earlier, the same dinner she'd been preparing for me every night. You're not well, Eli, she said, her tone softening, as if she were talking to a child. You're having episodes. You need treatment. You need care. I couldn't stop myself. The anger was bubbling up, the frustration, the terror. Don't gaslight me, Mira. I'm not insane. I know what's happening. You've been feeding me something, and you're using my migraines to cover it up. Her lips parted, but before she could say anything, I pushed past her, my fingers trembling as I grabbed the counter to steady myself. The dizziness was hitting again, but this time I pushed it down, pushed through it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't. I heard her step behind me, and when I turned around, I saw that she had pulled her phone out of her pocket. She was already recording. Eli, please, she said, her voice tight now, almost pleading. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm trying to help you. I couldn't breathe. You're the one who's making this harder. I'm not crazy. You've been poisoning me. Every time you cook, every time you give me something to eat, it's in there. What are you doing to me, Mira? She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. I'm doing what's best for you, she said, the words so flat, so rehearsed. This is for your own good, Eli. I'm not insane, I shouted, but she didn't respond to my panic. She just clicked her phone screen, the sound of the recording confirming what I already knew. I'm going to have to show this to the others, Eli, she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. You're having a psychotic break. You need to get help. I can't let you keep denying it. We can't keep going like this. I stared at her, my chest tight, breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. My heart was pounding in my throat. Get out of here. I managed, the words bitter and hard to swallow. Mira didn't move. Instead, she clicked the screen one more time, as if sealing some invisible fate between us. I'll make sure you get the care you need, she said softly, her eyes cold now. You can't keep doing this to yourself. And then, like she always did, she turned away, leaving me standing there, heart hammering in my chest, unable to breathe. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing for sure. She was going to make sure I couldn't tell anyone the truth. I didn't sleep at all that night. The anger, the confusion, it was too much. Myra's calm voice, her insistence that I was the problem, was a knife in my chest. I couldn't escape the weight of it, the way she manipulated everything. She had the power to twist everything I said, everything I felt, into something I was doing wrong. And the worst part? I couldn't prove it. Not yet. The next morning, I acted like everything was fine. I took my meds, made small talk, let her hover around me with that same concerned look on her face, as if she didn't already know what she was doing, as if I was the one who needed fixing. But I knew what I had to do. I set up the cameras that afternoon. It wasn't as if I could just walk up to Mira and say, "Hey, I'm setting up hidden cameras to catch you poisoning me." That would be the end of it. She would twist it into more proof of my delusions. She'd use it against me, frame it as further evidence of my mental breakdown. No, I had to be smarter. I had to be careful. The lab was empty that afternoon, perfect for setting up the cameras without anyone seeing. I hid them in places where she wouldn't notice, behind the equipment, above the counters, tucked in the corner near the window. The kitchen was my first target, but I needed the living room, too. The food, the smoothies, the way she kept tabs on my every move. It had to be recorded. I needed every angle, every second of this twisted routine she'd built. I also kept track of my health metrics. Blood pressure, pulse rate, temperature. Every possible number that could be a clue. If she was really poisoning me, I would have physical evidence, concrete proof. I didn't trust her anymore, and I couldn't trust myself to remember things in the haze she'd put me under. But if I had footage, samples, metrics, I could start to build something. I had to start making my body the lab. Over the next few days, I swapped out my medication when she wasn't looking. She had made me this cocktail of pills, mostly migraine stuff, but other medications too. Antidepressants, anti-anxieties. I'd been taking them for a while, but now, I was only taking the stuff I knew wouldn't hurt me. I replaced the pills with placebos and kept the originals hidden in a box in my lab. If I was right, if I could prove I was getting worse only when she was around, then the medication would be the key. I also collected samples from the food she made. It was the smoothies mostly. They were always different flavors, different ingredients, but always the same after effect, the nausea, the dizziness. I froze them in marine-grade specimen containers, hoping the cold would preserve whatever chemical traces I needed. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew that if I found something, if I could prove she was tampering with my food, then I could finally expose her. That night, she left for another botanical field trip, her usual excuse for being away. But as soon as the door clicked shut behind her, I started working faster. I didn't know when she'd be back, but I knew I needed more. I didn't care anymore if she saw me as obsessive. I didn't care if she thought I was paranoid. The only thing that mattered was finding the truth. I couldn't wait any longer. By the time Mira returned, I had sent hair and blood samples off to a private lab, using a colleague's name to keep it under the radar. I didn't care if it made me look suspicious. I had to know. When she came back, she was the same. Warm, loving Mira. She played the part like she always did. "I brought you a treat," she said, grinning as she came through the door, holding a small, cardboard box of baked goods. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't sure if I was even looking at her anymore. She was just a face, a shape. The idea of her, the idea of what she'd been doing to me, was too overwhelming. She watched me closely, waiting for me to smile, to say something appreciative. But I didn't. I just nodded and let the moment pass. I wasn't going to fall for it. Not anymore. Later that night, when she was in bed, I sneaked into the kitchen again. The place had become a war zone in my mind. Every cabinet, every drawer, a potential trap. But the worst part was that she always seemed to know how to manipulate it. I felt like a rat caught in a maze. I walked over to the counter where the smoothies sat. There was one waiting for me, the same bright color. This time, something purple. Maybe a berry mix. I didn't care anymore what flavor it was. I didn't care about anything except getting out. I stared at the glass, the thick liquid inside. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally going to get control of this. Finally, I poured the smoothie into a test tube, sealed it with a cap, and put it in the fridge. Tomorrow, I would send this to the lab, too. I just had to wait a little longer. Just a little longer. The next few days felt like a tense waiting game. Every moment with Mira felt like walking on a tightrope. Each conversation a delicate balancing act where I tried not to show my cards. She had no idea what I was doing, and that was the only thing keeping me sane. I kept the lab results hidden, the samples tucked away like evidence I couldn't afford to lose. But I was getting closer, closer to the truth, closer to something I could finally use. Mira was still playing her part, of course. She was the loving wife, the attentive caretaker, showering me with concern at every turn. I'd become expert at pretending, perfecting the mask I wore for her, for everyone. The more she hovered, the more I pulled away. But it was getting harder to hide the cracks. Then, one afternoon, things started to shift. She came home with a big smile on her face, practically glowing as she walked through the door. I knew something was coming, something I wasn't going to like. "I ran into Devin today," she said, her voice bright, almost too chipper. "You remember him, right? My old friend from grad school. He's a pharmacologist. He's been helping me tweak your prescriptions. I think we're finally getting your dosage right." My stomach turned at the mention of his name. Devin. I had met him a few times over the years, but he never struck me as the kind of person who'd go out of his way to help with someone's prescriptions. The way she said helping made it sound like they were working together on something, but I didn't know what. "I don't need more pills, Mira," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though the anger was creeping up. "I've been fine with what I've been taking. I don't need some pharmacologist messing with my meds." She didn't flinch, just smiled that infuriating, placating smile. "I know you don't want to hear it, but it's for your own good, Eli. We're just trying to get you back on track. You've been struggling so much with these episodes. We just want to make sure you're okay." She placed a hand on my arm, like she was the calm in the storm, the one who could fix it all. But I was done letting her control the narrative. "Are you saying you've been giving me more than just what's prescribed?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "Are you telling me you've been altering my medications without my knowledge?" She didn't answer immediately, just looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Then, after a long pause, she said, "You've been so out of it lately. I had to make adjustments. I had to make sure you were getting better, Eli. Don't you want to get better?" I stood up suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I don't want you adjusting anything. I'm not a science experiment, Mira." Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Annoyance, maybe, or something colder. "You're not thinking clearly. That's why I'm doing this. And now we have Devin's help. He's helping us get you back on track." She paused, then added, "It's a good thing, Eli. You should be grateful." I couldn't stomach it anymore. The way she spoke, like I was the problem, like I couldn't see through her lies, it was suffocating. "I don't want anything from you," I said, turning away from her, my voice low. "And I don't want anything from Devin. I'm not going to be your project." She didn't follow me this time, didn't try to argue further. She just stood there, watching me like I was the one who'd lost it, like I was the one who was unraveling. I couldn't stay in the house another minute. I needed space to think, to figure out what the hell was going on. I grabbed my jacket, slamming the door behind me as I stepped out into the cold evening air. The walk didn't help, it never did. My mind was a mess of half-formed thoughts and increasing dread. But when I got back, Mira was gone. It was almost too perfect. I didn't know where she'd gone, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to waste any more time. I needed to get the truth. I grabbed the waterproof container with my name engraved on it, the one I'd found in the trunk of her car a few weeks ago. I hadn't told her I'd seen it. I hadn't mentioned it at all. But now, I was going to take it. I was going to find out what the hell was inside. I drove to the lab, heart pounding, hands shaking as I pried open the container. Inside, I found the dive gear, heavy weights meant to sink it quickly. And there, at the bottom, a set of forged power of attorney forms. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Mira wasn't just trying to make me better. She wasn't just trying to help me. She was planning something. Something final. Something permanent. The air felt thick with the realization. She was preparing for something bigger. Something that would remove me from the picture, once and for all. I couldn't wait any longer. This wasn't just about getting proof anymore. This was about survival. I started planning. And this time, I wasn't going to let her control the story. I couldn't let this go on any longer. Mira had been playing me like a puppet, and now, with everything I'd uncovered, I was done pretending I didn't see what she was doing. The stakes were too high. I was too close to the edge. That night, I told Mira I wanted to invite Jonas over for dinner. I needed an ally, someone who might still believe me, someone who could see through the lies. Jonas had always been protective of me. I hoped he hadn't been completely blinded by Myra's charm. I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it together on my own. Mira smiled when I mentioned Jonas. "That's a great idea, Eli. I'll make your favorite fish curry. It'll be perfect." She was already off to the kitchen before I could stop her. The smile on her face. It was like she knew she had it all figured out. Like I was already part of her plan. I didn't trust her. I couldn't. The dinner wasn't until later, so I had time to think, to make sure everything was in place. The switch had to be subtle, but effective. If Jonas was going to see the truth, I had to make sure Mira couldn't hide behind her lies. I couldn't let her control this anymore. I made a plan, and then I followed it. As soon as Mira was in the kitchen, I swapped the plates. I didn't make a scene. I didn't confront her. I just moved quickly, quietly. I switched my plate with hers, taking the one that was just the way she liked it. The extra spices, the subtle bitterness of the sauce that she favored. I put it in front of Jonas when he arrived, and he didn't think anything of it. He was still trying to figure out why I'd asked him to come over. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the way he kept glancing at me as he sat down at the table. Mira, of course, didn't notice. She was too busy fawning over me, the way she always did. Too busy watching me, like I was fragile, like I was someone to be controlled. "Eat up, Eli," she said, her voice a little too bright. "You need your strength." I didn't say anything. I just watched her. Jonas took a bite of his food, but he hadn't even finished chewing before Mira began to slur her words. Her eyes started to unfocus, her head tilting slightly to the side. A bead of sweat appeared on her forehead, despite the cool air in the room. She wiped it away absently, but she couldn't stop herself from swaying in her seat. I wasn't sure if Jonas noticed at first, or if he was still trying to figure out why I looked so tense. But then Myra's speech became harder to follow. Her eyes darted around the room, like she was looking for something to hold on to, like she was trying to anchor herself to reality. "Mira," Jonas asked, setting his fork down, his face tightening. "What's wrong?" She didn't respond right away. She just stared at him, blinking rapidly, her mouth moving but no words coming out. Then, she collapsed forward, her head hitting the table with a soft thud. I didn't wait. I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services. "Paramedics," I said, my voice cold and steady despite the storm inside me. "My wife's had a severe reaction. She's disoriented. She's sweating. Her speech is slurred. I think she's been poisoned." I could hear Jonas panicking in the background, but I didn't care. I couldn't care. Mira had been playing this game for too long, and now it was finally over. The paramedics arrived within minutes, and they worked quickly to stabilize her. While they tended to her, I pulled Jonas aside. I couldn't let him leave yet. Not until I had a chance to make sure he knew what was really going on. "Jonas, listen to me," I said, my voice low, urgent. "You have to know what's been happening. Myra's been poisoning me. She's been poisoning me for months, and she's been pretending like I'm the one losing it. You have to believe me." Jonas looked at me like I was out of my mind. "Eli, what are you talking about? You've been talking about your episodes, about your memory problems, but I've been tracking it." I cut him off, pulling out a flash drive from my pocket. "I have evidence. I've been collecting it. I've got video footage of her tampering with my food, with my medication. I've got samples from the stuff she's been giving me. It's all on here. She's been poisoning me, Jonas. And I'm not the only one she's been doing it to. She's been playing everyone." Jonas stared at me for a long moment, his face pale. He glanced at the paramedics who were now loading Mira into the ambulance. He looked back at me, disbelief still written across his face, but there was something else too. Something that was starting to crack through the armor. "Jesus," he whispered. I didn't know. I had no idea. I could see it then, the realization dawning on him. He had no idea how deep it all went. But now, at least, he would. "Take this," I said, handing him the flash drive. "Take it to the authorities. I need you to believe me. I need you to help me." Jonas nodded, his hand shaking as he took the drive. But there was something else in his eyes now, something that wasn't there before. He wasn't just worried about me. He was seeing the truth. "Okay," he said, voice tight. "I'll do it." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I had someone on my side. The truth was out. It wasn't over, but it was a start. Mira wasn't going to win this time. The hospital was sterile, cold. I hadn't seen Mira since they'd rushed her to the ER, but I kept expecting to. I kept expecting her to walk through those doors, smile sweetly, and try to explain everything away, like she always did. But she didn't. And that terrified me even more than I expected. Jonas didn't stick around long after the ambulance left. He had to take care of the flash drive, get it to the right people. But that meant I was alone. Alone in the hospital, with my thoughts spiraling, with the knowledge that Myra's deception was finally unraveling. But still, it didn't feel like a victory. I'd been pacing in the small waiting room, waiting for any kind of update on her condition. The minutes dragged, each one heavier than the last. I didn't know if I was waiting for a miracle or just the inevitable. If her condition was as bad as I feared. If the truth was finally going to break her. Around 1 a.m., a nurse came to find me. "We've stabilized her," the nurse said, her expression unreadable. "She's under observation, but she's not out of the woods yet." I nodded, though the words didn't offer much comfort. How long? Could be a few hours, could be longer. But she's stable for now. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Stable for now. It wasn't an answer I was looking for. I needed clarity. I needed something I could use to rip the rest of this apart. I stood up, pacing again. The hospital walls felt suffocating, too close. I needed to move, to think. But I couldn't do it here. Not with her hovering, even in her absence, like a weight on my shoulders. I left the hospital without telling anyone, my steps quick and heavy as I made my way to the lab. The place where I'd been piecing everything together. If I was going to survive this, I needed the truth to be undeniable. Needed it in the hands of people who would listen, who wouldn't let her slither her way out of this. The lab was empty when I arrived, just the soft hum of the equipment around me, like it was waiting for me to break through the last barrier. I went to the freezer first. I knew what I had there: samples, the smoothies, the food, my blood tests. But I needed more. I needed something else that would make the evidence bulletproof. I had the footage. The video from the cameras I'd set up in the kitchen. The moments when she'd been hovering over my food, pouring God knows what into my meals. There were too many shots of her, too many angles of her tampering with things, adjusting doses, watching me carefully as I ate. But I needed one thing. I needed to show exactly how far it had gone. I pulled the footage of that night. The night I'd swapped the plates, the night she'd collapsed. Watching it on the screen made my blood run cold. There she was, smiling at me, handing me the food like everything was fine. Like I was the sick one. The moment I swapped plates with her, I could see how she barely even noticed the change, too focused on the performance, too focused on controlling how the night would go. Then, the moment I realized what was happening, her collapse, the slurred speech, the sweat beading on her forehead. That was the moment she lost control. It was all there. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was war. I downloaded the footage and packed it onto a drive, pulling the rest of the records from the past weeks. The test results, the blood work, the medications I'd been given, and her meticulous logs of when and how much I'd been prescribed. This was it. The final piece. But then the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked it up anyway. "Eli." Jonas' voice came through, but it wasn't quite his usual tone. It was tight, strained. "You need to get down here. Now." "What happened?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. The fear I'd buried for hours hit me in full force. "There's something. Myra's sister. She's here. She's trying to discredit everything. She's telling people you're manipulating the system. She's claiming you're framing Mira. You've got to get here before they turn this into something else." I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing. Of course, Myra's family would swoop in now, trying to save her, trying to turn the narrative around. "Is the drive safe?" I asked, not caring about anything else. "Yeah, it's in good hands. But you need to get to the hospital. Fast. It's escalating, Eli." I didn't wait for anything else. I grabbed the drive, shoved it into my jacket pocket, and made my way to the door. The weight of what I had to do, the weight of what was coming. It pressed on me, heavy and unrelenting. Mira wasn't going to play the victim anymore. This time, the truth was going to come out, no matter how hard she tried to bury it. I didn't look back as I left the lab. I had nothing left to lose. And neither did she. I got to the hospital in a haze of panic and adrenaline. The whole place felt like it was closing in on me as I walked through the emergency room doors. My mind was running through everything I had to do, everything I had to say to get people to listen, to make them see the truth. The fear I'd tried to ignore earlier was clawing its way back to the surface. Myra's sister, I knew she'd come in swinging, trying to paint me as some kind of villain. She was the last person I wanted to deal with right now. But she was the last person I'd have to deal with before I could make this whole damn mess go public. Jonas was waiting for me in the hallway, his face drawn tight with frustration. "I don't know what she's telling them, but they're starting to listen," he said, glancing over his shoulder as if someone might be following him. "She's telling people you're abusing her, that you're the one who's been poisoning Mira all along. She's got witnesses, friends, even a few of Myra's colleagues." I could feel my blood go cold. Witnesses? Who the hell's she been talking to? People who haven't seen you in a while. People who've only heard Myra's side of things. Jonas said, voice tight. They're questioning everything, Eli. They're questioning you. She's trying to turn this into a mental health issue, saying you've been paranoid, delusional, that you had a psychotic break, and that you're manipulating everything. I could hear the fury in Jonas' voice, but it didn't stop the crushing weight of what he said from sinking in. If Myra's sister was already spinning this narrative, she had the resources to make people believe it. She had the family. She had the allies. And here I was, still trying to prove the most basic truth of all. Where is she now? I asked, my words barely controlled. Jonas hesitated, glancing over his shoulder again before leaning in closer. She's in the room with Mira, talking to the doctors. They haven't told me much, but they're all getting on the same page. I swallowed hard. The same page. They were already getting ready to write me out of the story. All of this, the footage, the samples, the evidence I collected, was starting to feel like nothing more than smoke and mirrors. No one would listen unless I made them. I pulled the flash drive from my jacket pocket and held it up. I've got the proof, I said, voice low but determined. I've got the footage. I've got the samples. I've got everything. It's all on here. If we don't get this to the right people now, she's going to win. Jonas took the drive from me, his eyes heavy with doubt, but still searching for something to hold on to. I'll get it to the police. But, Eli, we need something stronger than just the truth. She's been planning this for a while. She's got everyone around her convinced. This might not be enough. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to face the possibility that the truth wouldn't be enough. I could feel the pressure rising in my chest, the tightness crawling up my throat. I don't care what it takes, I said, my voice clipped. She's not going to get away with it. Jonas nodded, and we both turned toward Myra's room. The door to the room was cracked open, and I could hear voices inside. Myra's voice, calm, almost soothing. I hated the sound of it now, the way it had once been the sound of comfort, the sound of home. But now, it was the sound of manipulation. I was done letting her play the victim. I pushed the door open, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Mira was sitting up in bed, her face pale but still painted with that same practiced calm. Her sister, Liz, was standing beside her, her eyes cold and sharp as she turned to look at me. Well, Eli, Liz said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I was wondering when you'd show up. Myra's eyes flickered over to me, and for the first time, I saw a glint of something that wasn't controlled, something close to panic. It was brief, but I caught it. Eli, Mira said, voice soft but calculating. This isn't helping. You need to stop making everything worse. I looked at Liz. You want to keep this up? You want to keep lying to everyone about what's been going on? Liz's smile didn't waver. Oh, I'm not the one lying, Eli. You are. You've been manipulating your way through this whole situation. You've been poisoning Myra's mind, making her think you're the one who's been sick, and now you're trying to turn the tables. No, I said, stepping closer. You're the one who's been lying, and I have the evidence to prove it. I pulled out the flash drive again, holding it up for both of them to see. You think you can just bury this, Liz? I said, voice low but steady. You think you can twist the truth until no one believes it? I've been documenting everything, every moment, every detail. This isn't just some paranoid delusion. This is real. Liz's eyes narrowed, but Myra's gaze was already shifting, darting from the flash drive to my face. Her expression was a mix of anger and something else I couldn't quite place. Fear? Regret? It was hard to say, but it didn't matter. The walls were closing in on her now, and she could feel it. I know what you've been doing, I said, my voice low and cold. And it's over. This isn't your story anymore. For a moment, no one spoke. Mira was still, like she was waiting for the world to bend back to the way she wanted it. But this time it wouldn't. I wasn't going to let it. Finally, Liz's smile faltered. You think this is going to end well for you, Eli? She said, voice tight. You think anyone's going to believe you? I don't care what you think, I said, cutting her off. Because it's not just me. It's her. I nodded toward Mira, the woman who had spent months pretending to care, pretending to love me. And now, her lies were finally coming apart. The silence that followed felt like it had weight. Myra's eyes flickered, but her expression didn't shift. Liz's stare, though, was cold, harder than I'd ever seen it. You don't know what you're talking about, Liz said, her voice tight, but still calm, like she was trying to maintain control. But I could see it. Her hands were shaking just a little, the way they gripped the edge of the hospital bed. She was rattled. And it was only a matter of time before the lie started cracking in front of everyone. Liz, you've been helping her, I said, stepping forward, pressing harder. You've been helping her poison me. The medication, the food, it's all there, all the proof. Myra's face went even paler, and for a moment, I thought I saw something break behind her eyes. Something small, something desperate. She looked at Liz, and for the first time, I saw her hesitate. It wasn't the cool, calculating woman I'd been living with for months. It wasn't the partner who'd pretended to care. It was the woman who knew she was losing the fight. Please, Myra said, her voice a fraction of the usual sweetness. Please, Eli, stop. I could barely hear her, but it was enough. Enough to make it real. She wasn't controlling the situation anymore. I'm not stopping, I said, my voice harsh. You've been poisoning me for months. I've got everything. Everything. The footage, the samples, the blood tests, it's all on record. Liz's posture stiffened. This won't end well for you, Eli, she said, her words sharp now, a threat hanging in the air. Do you really think anyone's going to believe you over Myra? Over us? I don't care what anyone believes anymore, I shot back. I've had enough of the lies. This is bigger than you or me now. At that, Liz took a deep breath, like she was about to explode, but Myra finally spoke up again. Please, Eli, she said, her voice almost pleading now. You don't understand what I was trying to do. It was for you. All of it was for you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her she was lying, that she'd been trying to kill me, not help me. But her words hung in the air, thick with the weight of every time she'd manipulated me, every time she'd convinced me I was the one who was losing it. You were trying to kill me, Myra, I said, voice shaking with the rage I could barely contain. And now you're trying to play the victim? She flinched at the words, but the crack in her mask was barely noticeable. She had control of herself again. Eli, I was just trying to help you, she repeated, but it was weaker now, less sure of itself. I was trying to save you from yourself, she added in a whisper, as if that would make everything okay. But there was nothing she could say to fix it. I've been documenting everything, I said, leaning in closer, the rawness in my voice scraping through the air. And when the authorities get their hands on this, they're going to see you for what you really are. A manipulator. A liar. A murderer. I watched as her face twisted. The cold mask she'd held up for so long cracked. It was all slipping away now, and she knew it. You think you can destroy me? Myra said, her voice thick with something else now. Fear? Fury? You think anyone is going to believe you over me? I shook my head. I don't care if they do. I don't need anyone to believe me anymore. The evidence is there. And when it's on the record, when it's out in the world, you won't be able to hide. Jonas came in then, his face drawn, eyes wild with what I knew had been a long night of trying to keep the pieces together. He was holding the folder with all the evidence, and I could see the weight of it on him. Myra, Liz, he said, his voice low and steady. I think it's time to stop pretending. The police are coming. They've seen the footage. They've seen everything. You're done. Liz shot him a look, venom in her eyes. This isn't over, she said, her teeth gritted. You have no idea what you're doing. None of you do. Jonas didn't flinch. We're done here, Liz. The truth is out. For a moment, no one spoke. Myra was silent, her face drained of any pretense. She looked smaller now, less in control, like she was seeing the enormity of what she'd done, and it was finally catching up to her. But it wasn't over yet. Not for me. We'll see what happens in court, I said, voice steady, though every part of me felt like it was about to break apart. But this ends now. You won't get to keep playing this game. Myra didn't look at me. She didn't say a word. But in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't let myself think about before. This wasn't just about winning. It was about surviving. And I was going to make sure she never did this to anyone again. I stepped away from the bed, my eyes on Myra's face just long enough to see the last flicker of the person I'd once known. The woman who'd been my partner, who'd been everything. And then, I turned and walked out of that room. I didn't look back as I left the room. I couldn't. The weight of everything was still pressing down on me, and I wasn't sure how to carry it yet. I hadn't allowed myself to think too much about the future, about what would happen after this moment. But as I walked down the sterile hospital corridor, my mind began to piece together a life I hadn't even realized I was capable of imagining. A life that didn't include Myra. A life that didn't involve her quiet manipulations, her subtle cruelties. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for months, and I was finally allowed to exhale. But I couldn't think about that now. I needed space. I needed time to let everything settle. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the ground floor, my mind buzzing with what would come next. Mira would be arrested. She would face the consequences of what she'd done to me. To us. But that wasn't what consumed me. What consumed me was the fallout. The people who would question me. The ones who would wonder if I had missed something, if I'd ignored the signs. I had let myself be a fool for too long. But no one else would get the chance to turn my suffering into a story I didn't write. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped out into the lobby, breathing in the cool air of the exit. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I pulled it out, seeing a message from Remy, my assistant at the lab. He'd stuck by me through everything, and even though he'd been quieter than usual since I'd been home, I knew he'd never abandoned me. I heard, "How you holding up?" I let out a breath and typed back quickly, "Surviving. Need to get out of here. Let's talk soon." I didn't want to be surrounded by the sterile walls of the hospital any longer. The memories of what Mira had done were suffocating, and I had no intention of staying another minute in a place that reminded me of all the ways she'd nearly succeeded in taking everything from me. As I walked out into the parking lot, the weight of the night still pressed down on me. But this time, it was different. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't just someone at the mercy of her cruelty. I was the one with control now, the one with the truth. I got into my car and started the engine, the hum of the engine comforting in its quiet simplicity. I didn't have a destination. I just needed movement, space to breathe, space to think. I drove for a while, aimlessly, until I found myself on a quiet stretch of road, surrounded by trees and open fields. I pulled over to the side of the road, not sure why I'd stopped, but grateful for the silence. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window. I wasn't ready to go back to the lab, wasn't ready to face the flood of questions that would come. I needed time to digest it all, to let the enormity of everything settle in my chest. I thought of Myra's last words, the pleading, the desperation she'd tried to mask under that layer of calm. But the woman who had been my wife wasn't there anymore. All I could see now was the cold, calculated person who had tried to destroy me. The person I had mistaken for someone I loved. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Jonas. "Hey," I said, my voice rough, though I couldn't tell if it was from the weight of the day or the strain in my chest. "What's up? I just wanted to check in," Jonas said, his voice quieter than usual. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "It's over. It's really over." "Good," he said, his tone softer. "I know this isn't going to be easy, Eli, but you're not alone in this. We're all behind you." I felt the lump in my throat swell again. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't find the words. "Thanks, Jonas," I said finally, my voice thick. "I'm going to need time to figure this out." "Take all the time you need," he said. "We'll be here when you're ready." I ended the call and sat there in the silence, letting the reality of everything settle around me. Mira was gone from my life. The lie she'd built was finally torn apart, but there was still so much to face. So much I hadn't processed, so much I didn't know how to feel about. I thought about the ocean, the one I'd spent my life studying, the one that had always calmed me, even when everything else felt chaotic. Maybe that's where I needed to be next. A quiet place, far away from the noise of everything that had happened. Somewhere I could breathe, somewhere I could heal. I took a deep breath and pulled away from the side of the road, heading toward the coast. I didn't know what I was walking into, but for the first time in a long time, I knew I was walking toward something real, something I could hold on to. And that was enough.